I once read a book by an explorer who was talking about people who live in Greenland. And he was saying that the people in Greenland are very trusting people, that you can come and tell them almost anything and they accept it at face value. There's just no concept in their culture of calling you a liar. Until somebody who had been an explorer, had been one of the people who had gone with the explorers who went to the North Pole, went back to New York and then came back to Greenland and told them, this is 75, 80 years ago, that in New York he had seen that a person can talk on a telephone, that there's something you can pick up here and talk through a string, and far, far away they can hear it. And they threw him out of the village. That's such a lie that you can't believe it. Today, we have so much progress that we take everything for granted. That you can give a speech today and in a short while it can be on YouTube and people can be watching it in Israel, and to us that's just normal. Well, I want to say that for thousands of years we've been praying for the return to Zion, and only 60 years later we take it for granted. We are a generation that has lived to see something that our ancestors only dreamed about. But the story of Israel, and the story that I want to tell tonight, which is entitled Our Brother's Keepers, and maybe for this audience, Our Sister's Keepers, would be, I want to start over 100 years ago. 100 years ago, 1909, go back even further, the 1860s, 70s, 80s, there were millions and millions of Jews, the ancestors of many of us, who lived in Eastern Europe. And the Jews who lived in Russia were terribly oppressed. They were the largest concentration of Jews in the world, and they lived under an openly anti-Semitic regime of the Tsar, which made no secret of its desire to do something to end what they considered a Jewish problem. And their solution was 1/3 emigration, 1/3 assimilation, and 1/3 death. They felt, this was openly stated, that they would get some Jews to leave, some Jews to become Russian, and others would die from various causes. And Jews who cared wanted to do something about the problem of Russian Jewry. And the story of the state of Israel really begins there. Because what do you do if you have millions of Jews living in poverty with a repressive regime, with very little opportunity to advance? What do you do? Many people, there were different solutions. One solution was that they should move within Russia and become farmers in Siberia or some other place. Another solution was that they should go to a country like Argentina. You know that there are hundreds of thousands of Jews in Argentina. They didn't end up there by accident. Baron de Hirsch, who was one of the wealthiest people in the world, paid for many, many colonies to be established over there. Baron de Hirsch also established colonies in America. He didn't think that Palestine was a viable solution. There were a small handful of multi-billionaires. Baron de Hirsch was one of them. Baron Rothschild was another. There were others that I'll talk about who were willing to put their money where their mouth was. They wanted to do something to help the poor Russian Jews. One of the solutions was that they should go to the land of Israel and build it up. That was a distinct minority opinion. Very few people subscribed to it, and most of the money that was invested was to send them any place but Israel. There was one exception. There was a rabbi in the city of Bialystok. Bialystok is an important city in what's today Poland. His name was Reb Shmuel Mohelever. Reb Shmuel Mohelever was one of the founders of Chovevei Tzion, of those who love Zion. And he wanted to rebuild the land of Israel to solve the Jewish problem in Russia. Poland and Russia were one in those days. He didn't know what to do. How do you do it? He had people, but he didn't have any money. So Reb Shmuel Mohelever went to Paris, and he was able to convince the chief rabbi of France to get him an appointment with Baron de Rothschild. And Baron Rothschild was an assimilated Jew, not too learned, and he really took one look at Reb Shmuel Mohelever, who looked like a rabbi from Bialystok, and he said, okay, you have 10 minutes. I don't know exactly what Reb Shmuel Mohelever said to Baron Rothschild, but about 6 hours later, Baron Rothschild devoted the rest of his life to building up the land of Israel. If it wouldn't have been for Reb Shmuel Mohelever speaking to Baron Rothschild, a lot of what we see today would not have happened. Rothschild funded. It wasn't that they had a UJA. He funded to send colonies. And they found a group of Jews in a village in Russia who had some experience in farming. It was hard to find Jews who had farmed, but they sent them, and they started a city called Ekron. Ekron was a village, and it had a very, very difficult time. The soil wasn't so great for farming, but they started. They had difficult times. They went through a lot of difficulties. That was the first of a number of colonies that were started in the 1880s. Eventually, then there was a big problem. Who here has heard of Shemitah? Okay, the 7th year, not supposed to plant. Well, Baron Rothschild couldn't understand how I'm supposed to pay for a colony, and every 7th year they take a vacation. It blew his mind. And the people who went to Ekron were not learned Jews, but they decided that they were going to follow Shemitah, and they weren't going to plant that year. Reb Shmuel Mohelever told them, he wrote that they could do it. He gave them a legal justification, but they wanted to be more strict than that. They listened to the rabbis of Jerusalem who told them no. And many people starved. It almost fell apart, but somehow it continued. And Rothschild used to write nasty letters to Reb Shmuel Mohelever back in Bialystok, from Paris to Bialystok, telling him, you sent me, those people you sent are a bunch of schleppers, they don't want to work, they don't know what they're doing, I'm not going to give you any more money, this is the last straw. All I can tell you is he invested millions and he never stopped. And Reb Shmuel Mohelever said that in his casket, when they bury him, he wants all of the letters where Baron Rothschild curses him out under his head, because that is his ticket to the world to come. There were other Jews. Most Jews didn't believe in it, though. And it was a very serious problem. Why? Because some people felt we couldn't go back to Israel because waiting for the Messiah to bring us. And if I'm going to wait for the Messiah, it's not a very hospitable place. There wasn't an economy. It was very hard. But villages grew.